Okay, so welcome back to me kind of redoing some of my more popular videos, and then also redoing videos that weren't so popular, and maybe if I make them better, they'll be popular. Who knows? So people really tend to enjoy my straight edge bowls. I aim for sort of a right, sort of straight angle, more like a cylinder on the bottom. As a lot of you may know, I divide all of my work into three things, or I believe all pottery breaks into three things. A cylinder, a bowl, and a flat thing. But the flat thing can also be a cylinder and a bowl. So I think that my straight edge bowl is more of a cylinder because what I'm aiming for is sort of a right angle on the bottom. Or not a right angle, but I guess a 45-degree angle. But I'm not aiming for a smooth, rounded transition, which to me would be a bowl, a rounded bottom bottle, maybe a chip and dip so that it's round on the bottom. So it's really all about how you open up your floor. That to me is the definitive point where you're sitting down and you know exactly what you want to make. So a lot of beginners don't really think about what they're going to make when they sit down. But as you get more advanced, you really want to have an idea of what that piece of clay is going to become. It's going to determine how wide your mound of clay is. It's going to also determine what type of clay you use. So maybe if you're making something super large, you want to maybe go ahead and find yourself a little bit of a drier piece of clay. If you are making something narrow, you want your mound to be a little narrower. If you're making a plate, obviously you've got to center that super wide. So this straight edge bowl is going to be sort of narrow on the bottom. So I don't want to start with it super wide with the mound. So this is 4.5 pounds of clay. I'm just sort of centering it. You guys can hear that little wobble going on in my backs. It's the middle of the session. So the holes get a little stretched. Hopefully if your studio offers bats, you teach people to clean both sides and to hold them sideways. Maybe they replace the bats. Maybe you buy a bat mate, or you just kind of fight your way through it, which is kind of what I do. I shove dry clay into those holes, and by putting dry clay into those holes, it gives you a little bit of time before it gets gooey to move around. Wet clay is just going to move around, so sometimes if I slow my wheel down a little bit. So I'm going to skip the centering because I have plenty of videos about centering, and I find that when I watch my analytics, a lot of you guys speed through this part anyway, so okay. I do have a just centering video. All right. So I don't want to start with it super narrow because I still need it to hold the weight of what I'm going to be doing up on top. Now, remember, whenever I make anything that is going to stick out here, I don't want to start with it sticking out here. I always want to build within the realm of where gravity cannot affect it. So I don't want to build out here. The minute I start to come out here, the gravity and the centrifugal force start to fight what you're trying to do by going up. So I try and build up and then I shape it. With this specific type of bowl, I will be pulling out the heat gun. Some of you guys like blow torches. They make me nervous, but hey. With this bowl also, I want to have a real good foot. I want to have more like this like Asian style, super high foot to kind of really lift that up. So again, my elbows are pushed down, my wheel's going fast. I'm going to take 2 thumbs. I'm going to go ahead and drive those down. My fingers start to get a little dry. I got in the comments, some people worry about this little bit of clay. I don't care about that little bit of clay. It doesn't affect my life. I start to go down. Now what I want you guys to know is I'm holding on to the outside of my clay, but I'm not squeezing. The more that I squeeze, the more it's going to start eating away the clay, and then we get groggy. I'm just sort of bracing myself. My fingertips are pushing down on the bat, which you can maybe see. Here, I'll pick it up so you can see. that sort of dark brown line, that shows where my fingertips are bracing on the bat. Could it hurt a little? Sure, but you know what? Everybody suffers a little for their craft. So I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna actually pull out here. I'm gonna take my nifty all-in-one pin tool, wood tool, plastic tool. I'm gonna stick it down in there. Now you guys are gonna be shocked as to how much clay I'm leaving here. I have a good inch there. And the reason why I have a good inch is I'm gonna accommodate to my throwing style. My throwing style tends to be a little aggressive. I tend to go fast. So I'm gonna eat away that floor. So when I have an inch, I'm gonna end up with a 3/4 of an inch. But again, I want a good 1/2 inch foot on the bottom of this. Now this is where it becomes super important. I am not opening up my bowl to be round. I don't want this slope right here. I want it to be more of a sort of flower pot, like, you know, those like brown terracotta flower pots that you buy at the Home Depot, where they're sort of angular. That's what I'm aiming for. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put my fingers inside. I'm gonna scoop with my fingertips, and I'm not gonna scoop up. I'm gonna scoop in with my fingertips, and I'm gonna come out the way I went in. That's the deciding factor between a bowl form and a cylinder form. We're going super fast because there's a bigger piece of clay. I'm gonna use my 2 middle fingers. I'm gonna pull straight towards me, and I'm not gonna open up super wide. I'm gonna come out the way I went in. I know that's super hard for you to see, I promise. I will eventually get that camera on top. Just trying to get day by day. So I'm gonna get that clay out, but I will kind of maybe pick this up and show you guys. Just sort of compressing that floor. And again, I don't have to go in circles with the sponge. You just hold that sponge in one spot. We don't chase children around a merry-go-round. We wait in one spot and we say, "Hi, honey. I see you." So we don't have to go in circles. Hold it in one spot. And remember, brace those elbows. You ever lose that sponge? It's usually because you're like, woo. Okay, let's see if you can see what's going on in there. So hopefully you're able to see that I've got this right angle. I took my 2 fingers, I scooped them in, and then I came out the way I went in. The converse of that is if I was to scoop, make it round, what that's gonna do is gonna give me a round inside, which is not what I want, but it's also gonna thin this out because you're scooping, and inevitably, you're gonna be making it into a bowl a little too quickly. Okay, so now we're gonna start to pull our walls. So I'm a little off center from playing around with this so much, so I'm just gonna have my outside hand locked in here. I'm gonna have my right hand sort of scooped, no fingertips, elbows down. I'm just gonna make the wheel go super fast, and that's gonna sort of help to recenter it. You could always recenter your clay if it was centered to begin with. But if you put the hole not in the middle, you're never gonna get that thin side to be thick again or that thick side to be thin there. You're pretty much done. It's that yummy bagel that has the thin side and the thick side. So now I'm gonna start to pull. I slowed my wheel down. You guys can hear this is my centering speed, my open up and my floor. Now I'm gonna slow down a little, start to pull my walls. Now I don't wanna go too slow because I want the speed to facilitate what I'm trying to do, and the walls are thick enough that it can handle it. So I start down on the bottom, scoop, and then I'm gonna start to pull up. I'm using a slightly bigger tool this time. I'm using almost my whole almost my full forefinger of my index finger. I did slip on the inside, hence the minor curse word, which is why I don't make my videos good for kids. But I'm actually literally almost not using my knuckle, but I'm using sort of this whole part of my finger here. I'm gonna get down here again. I slow down a little bit at the bottom so I can scoop up some clay, and then I start to come up. What I'm sort of doing is I'm aiming for a V-shaped cylinder. Now you see how I've been a little more aggressive than I should be, so I've got this extra clay here. I will sometimes just sort of try and push that back in before I continue my pull, because if I don't, sometimes that loop of clay will come off on the top of my pot, which is not the biggest deal ever. What you've actually done accidentally is you've scooped clay up and you're bringing it up with you. Now I want you to remember, we are not taking clay from the bottom and bringing it to the top. That's not how this works. We are actually squeezing the clay on the bottom to thin it out. And when I squeeze it to thin it out, it jacks this clay up. So as you squeeze more and more, it forces this clay to come all the way to the top. This clay will never be part of the lip of this pot. It's like toothpaste. You squeeze from the bottom if you're a responsible person, and that causes the toothpaste to come out of the top. Obviously, not everyone does that. We're in a rush. We squeeze from the middle. But you know, once a week when you clean up your toothpaste. So I'm going to start down here again. Scoop. And start to go up. Now remember, my main goal is to get my walls a little bit under the desired thickness before I shape it. And remember, we always want to keep a thick lip. We want to make sure that we're pulling and we're meeting up here. We don't want to close our fingers. That thin lip, when we stretch it out here, is going to be way too thin. And that's going to cause fractures and cracks when we're trimming. And we may not even know that that fracture is there until that very last firing. If you follow us on Instagram, just happened to me. I made a bowl that was way too thin. I trimmed it, and I didn't know there was a crack in there, and everyone keeps asking me, can you fix it? No. You can throw it away or break it into a lot of pieces and make it into a mosaic. Okay. So I'm just gonna get one more pull here. Now my walls are probably a little bit under, probably about a 1/4 inch thick. Now, you might say that's a little too thick for my liking, but again, I want to really sort of stretch this guy out. And if I don't have a 1/4 inch wall, when I stretch it out here, it's going to be too thin. Now, what I keep on reminding everybody is, you may have purchased this really thin walled pot at a fair or maybe at the Home Goods, and you're like, I want a pot that thin. They did not first start that thin. It shrunk to that thin. Not only does your pot shrink in height and width, it shrinks in thickness of wall. Remember, we're talking about our grape turning into a raisin. So we all know raisins are really tiny, or like a craisin or something like that. So it's gonna be thin in the wall as well once it hits that, desired temperature. Okay, so now I've got sort of this shape. Now I'm gonna take this rib right here. I'm a huge fan of this rib. This is Mud Tools, which we'll discuss in another video about the disaster of Asheville. If you look at my Instagram, there's a little bit of a sort of information where you can donate money. People have no idea that Asheville is the center of American pottery. And for it to affect such a huge subculture of our earth is pretty crazy. And I wish CNN or somebody would go in and go do an actual piece on just that. So anyway, I digress. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this tool super still. I want to start with a minor angle. Maybe I'll start this way. I hold it in the hole, elbow is pushed down. And I'm just going to sort of start it off. It's like a light sketch. I'm going to go inside. I don't want to start all the way at the bottom because that's where my foot's going to go. I'm going to start a little higher, and I'm going to have it at this first starting angle. I'm going to sort of make a mark there on the bottom, and now I'm going to start to push my wall up against the rib. Now, something that happens is we tend to lose the strength down on the bottom a little. So we really want to have those fingers pushing down, because as we start to get aggressive, it's going to start to get a little round over there. I'm going to take my goop off. I'm actually going to try and flip it this way, actually, for that reason. I think it gives me a little bit better of a grip. And now I'm going to add to that angle. And I'm going to push up against that tool. Don't be nervous. Be aggressive. Until I get to the top. And you want to remember to compress that lip. Now, right here is super thin. Right up here is super thin. So that's telling me that I really can't go too far. So ideally, if you really wanted to think this out, when you build your walls, you would make them thinner on the bottom and thicker on the top. That's a lot to think about. So I just want you to try and get the shape first. Get that water out of the inside. Let's see how much farther we can shape this. So I'm going to go down here again, wet my sponge. So what I've got is I got my tool still. My head is all the way down here. You can probably see me now. And I'm going to push up against that tool.
with my sponge on the inside. I also wet my rib, and I'm pushing all the way out. So I think I lied to you guys in the beginning. I think I said that I was going to use the heat gun, but I'll be honest, I don't think this has the ability to really stretch much farther, so I don't think it's going to be necessary for me to really do that. Now what's going on is the inside has this sort of beginner bump. Let's see if I can pick this up. And again, even with this sort of angle bowl, we want sort of a smoother transition. See that bump down there? And that's because I'm paying attention so much to the outside. At this point with any bowl, I want to start paying attention to the inside. Because remember, this bottom part here, if it doesn't go straight, I can trim that, right? So what I'm going to actually do is get in here and sort of 2 hands and a sponge. So when I just move that bowl, the gravity threw it off a little. So try not to pick up your bowls. I'm just going to sort of push that beginner bump so that I have a straight angle. Put my hand on the outside here too. Funny, I always tell people when they're looking at their bowls or their pots, like, don't pick them up and go, oh, it looks good that way, because the gravity inevitably will pull it, especially as you get bigger. And again, I don't practice what I preach. So. Okay. So I've sort of gotten rid of that sort of beginner bump, and I take my finger and I sort of reinforce what I was aiming for up on the top. Down on the bottom, getting that right angle. And I'll show it to you guys when I'm all done. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can stretch this a little bit more. And you know what? If it messes up, it turns out you guys like when I mess up. So I'm gonna get in here again, go a little bit more of an angle. And I'm just gonna sort of try and push it a little bit more. If I wanted to heat it up with a heat gun, I would. The reason why I'm not is it's already dry enough, and I don't think I can push this much farther because of how thin the top is. So I even added a little finger mark in here for you. Now again, I've got a real good foot down there. You can even maybe see it. I'll pick it up so you can see it. What I want to do is I want to sort of get some of that off so that I know, well, so that it dries evenly, right? My wood tool. Now, if your bowl is too low, if the profile kind of hangs out too low, you don't have to worry about the excess clay. You can take that off later. As long as you chop it and separate it from your pot, then when it dries, that part is just going to shrink off, and you'll be able to just peel it away later after you wire it. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on here. I tend to always have a little bit of a round lip here. So what I also like about these type of bowls is I like to have a definitive lip. So I like to definitively decide that that lip is going to be perpendicular or parallel to the plane, or a little bit of an angle. And I tend to do a little bit of an angle with my finger. I'm just sort of compressing it because it sort of counteracts the angle of the bowl. But that's just me being artsy. I just dropped a piece of caca in there. Shaboom. Let's get rid of that. I sponge a little. Again, I'm just gonna sort of do that. I'm gonna clean off my bat. Remember, when you're making a bowl or something big, you always wanna make sure you clean the edges of your bat. When you go to lift it up, if it's slimy and slippery, or you have a lot of caca on your fingers, when you get in here, you're gonna go, and then everyone's gonna curse, and then everyone's gonna go, oh my God, what happened? And then you're gonna have to explain that you were just careless. So remember to dry this, oh, I almost did it. Okay, so there we go. I'm gonna actually pull the camera. You guys can see sort of that angle that I created there. That's a good sized foot. Remember this little piece of clay right here? When I wire it, that's just gonna fall apart. So I'm just gonna leave it there. It's gonna dry a lot quicker than even the bowl. So I'll turn it. There we go, look. Oh my God, great, cool, awesome. So I'm actually gonna try and remember to do a trimming video of this because I want you guys to see how I got that really high foot, where I placed it, the angle, and some of the tricks I do for my feet. So hopefully you enjoyed my straight edge 4.5 pound bowl using standard 112 clay.